On today's episode of the Uncut podcast, we will be handling a serious topic, a topic that needs to be talked about and that affects millions of people daily, but also one that to both me and Joe, we hold it very close to our hearts. We will be talking about mental health. So, without any further ado, let's step into this episode.
And now the Uncut podcast presented by Joe and Theo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Now, mental health is a very broad and large topic. There are a lot of conversations to be had, and for that reason, both me and Joe felt that speaking broadly about mental health for however long this episode will be will not do the subject justice. What we decided to do for this episode is focus on two large sources and or causes for mental health. So, as presented by the World Health Organization, the two ones that we'll be talking about today is employment problems and genetics. Now, this episode will be a long one because we will be mixing both the facts episode we've been doing and the discussion episodes into one for this one. We felt that just simply discussing mental illness will not do this subject justice because there are factual pieces of data that need to be brought to light and spoken about. And essentially, with these housekeeping items taken care of, let's discuss the facts around the first major source or cause of mental illness, that being employment problems. So, what exactly are employment problems? Well, employment problems encompass a wide range of issues that directly and significantly impact mental health, touching nearly every facet of an individual's life. So the challenges begin with job security and unemployment, where layoffs, part-time roles, and mismatches in skill sets results in financial instability and chronic stress. Now, these problems often escalate into depression and anxiety as individuals face inconsistent job opportunities. Wages and compensation are another critical area. Low wages and pay inequality disproportionately affect women and minorities. Furthermore, gig workers and temporary employees experience an additional burden due to limited benefits and withheld payments, deepening the financial strain. Now, another big one is workplace discrimination, which further compounds these issues, manifesting through gender, racial, age, and disability biases that hinder career growth, diminish morale, and create unequal pay scales. The emotional toll extends to harassment and toxic work cultures, where sexual harassment, bullying, and emotional abuse contribute to stress, anxiety, and lowered self esteem. Health and safety concerns in workplaces, particularly those with hazardous conditions or long, stressful hours, threaten both physical and mental well being. A lack of adequate health insurance amplifies these vulnerabilities, leaving workers without proper care. Furthermore, workplace rights violations, such as unpaid overtime, exploitation, and limited leave options, exacerbate employee dissatisfaction and burnout. High turnover rates, fueled by a lack of career growth opportunities and excessive demands, weaken workplace morale and productivity. Simultaneously, an imbalance in work-life dynamics, often worsened by overwork or blurred boundaries in remote work setups, leads to mental fatigue and isolation. Skill mismatches caused by rapid technological changes leave many unemployed or even underemployed, fostering dissatisfaction and again, financial instability. And finally, another big topic here is migrant workers, which face unique and severe challenges. Often subject to exploitation, unsafe conditions, and legal barriers, they experience heightened job insecurity, financial difficulties, and additional mental health challenges, painting a stark picture of inequity in the modern workforce. Together, all of these employment related issues reveal a deeply interconnected web of factors that profoundly influence mental well being in society. So, having said that now, who's to blame for these problems? Well, employment problems stem from both company specific practices and macro environmental factors, making it very difficult to pinpoint a single source of blame. At the company level, issues like layoffs, inadequate wages, workplace discrimination, and toxic cultures arise from internal policies, leadership decisions, and corporate strategies. For instance, companies determine pay scales, enforce safety regulations, and shape their work culture, directly influencing job security, compensation, and employee well being. However, on the flip side, on the macro level, economic conditions, societal biases, technological advancements, and regulatory systems play a significant role. Economic downturns, inflation, systemic inequality, and weak enforcement of labor laws exacerbate employment challenges across a variety of industries, creating widespread disparities in wages, safety, and even workplace protections. So, the interplay between these two factors is evident in issues like skill mismatches and immigrant worker treatment. So, while companies can address skill gaps through training, broader gaps in education systems and technological changes drive these mismatches. Similarly, employers are responsible for fair treatment and legal compliance, but global migration policies and political climates shape the experiences of migrant workers. Ultimately, employment problems reflect a blend of organizational decisions and external forces. Companies must tackle what they can control while recognizing the influence of broader societal and economic dynamics. This dual responsibility highlights the complexity of finding clear accountability for these issues. So, having said that, now, having seen that essentially you can't put the blame nor on one nor on the other, really. Who really bears the burden of this? So, gender significantly influences the experience of unemployment challenges, with women often bearing the brunt of systemic inequalities. Wages and compensation remain a glaring issue, as women in the US earn only 82 cents for every dollar earned by men, with the disparity widening for women of color. Black women earn just 63 cents, and Latino women earn 55 cents compared to white men. Furthermore, workplace discrimination further compounds the issue, with 42% of women reporting gender discrimination, double the rate for men, and women accounting for the majority of sexual harassment and gender based claims. The workplace itself often exacerbates challenges. One in three women has experienced workplace sexual harassment, which they report as more frequent and severe compared to men, who face different forms such as physical harassment. Women also face unique health and safety risks. Now, while men dominate hazardous roles, accounting for 92% of workplace fatalities, women in caregiving jobs face repetitive strain injuries and infection risks. Furthermore, caregiving responsibilities create additional burdens, with one in four women contemplating downshifting their careers or leaving the workplace due to family demands, compared to one in five men. This struggle extends into work life balance, as 56% of mothers report difficulty managing work and family, versus 32% of fathers. Women often take part time roles to accommodate caregiving, sacrificing career growth and financial stability. In terms of representation, women remain underrepresented in leadership and high paying fields like STEM, where they make up just 28% of the workforce despite higher educational attainment than men. Now, migrant women face even starker challenges, including exploitation and harassment, especially in low wage sectors. Finally, women's job security has been disproportionately affected by economic upheavals, as evidenced during the COVID 19 pandemic, when they accounted for 55% of job losses, particularly in service industries. Now, these disparities highlight persistent systemic issues, including pay inequity, discrimination, caregiving burdens, and underrepresentation, all of which demand a dual approach: organizational reforms to address immediate workplace inequities, and societal shifts to support women's roles in caregiving and leadership. But of course, we cannot sit here on the sideline and say that men are unaffected either. The above statistics were just to showcase that the burden, unfortunately, for these mental health issues does fall on women. However, what mental illnesses are created for both men and women by these employment problems? Well, employment challenges, while not inherently mental health issues, often become catalysts for significant psychological distress. Now, the link between these job related stressors and mental health is undeniable, with clear patterns emerging from various workplace problems. For instance, job loss and unemployment are among the most potent triggers leading to depression in 60% of affected individuals. The impact is more pronounced for women, with 65 to 70% experiencing depression compared to 50 to 60% of men. Anxiety rates triple among the unemployed, and the risk of suicidal ideation doubles during prolonged joblessness. Discrimination, harassment, and toxic environments exacerbate these struggles. Around 34% of employees subjected to workplace discrimination report depression, with the numbers rising to 45 to 50% for women. Harassment further heightens the toll. 30 to 50% of victims, especially women, develop PTSD, while others experience chronic stress, burnout, and anxiety. In physically demanding or high risk jobs, PTSD affects 15 to 20% of workers, and injured employees frequently report depression and anxiety, especially women in caregiving roles. Work-life balance and job security compounds these challenges. Poor balance increases depression and anxiety risks threefold, disproportionately affecting women 35 to 40% compared to men 25 to 30%. Skill mismatches lead to low self-esteem and depression in 30% of affected workers. Migrant laborers face unique challenges, with 40 to 50% reporting anxiety and depression due to exploitation and legal vulnerabilities, and 25 to 40% suffer from PTSD. Now, these stressors that we've discussed previously, these employment problems, really give rise to four key mental health consequences: depression, anxiety, PTSD, and self esteem issues. And what's important is to recognize how these mental health challenges or these mental health issues manifest in the person suffering from them. Depression manifests through social withdrawal, low motivation, and mood changes. Anxiety often appears as restlessness, avoidance, or physical symptoms like rapid heartbeat. PTSD symptoms include hypervigilance, emotional numbness, and irritability. And self esteem struggles are reflected in persistent self doubt, excessive apologizing, and avoiding challenges. And it's very important that recognizing these mental health impacts and their behavioral signs, such as social withdrawal, hypervigilance, or negative self talk, is really crucial here. Early intervention and support, including professional help, can mitigate the far reaching consequences of these issues, fostering healthier individuals and healthier workplaces. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. There are a lot of solutions out there, and even before speaking about these solutions, I do want to take a time to speak a bit on the awareness around the employment problems. So, over the past 2 decades, awareness and action surrounding the mental health impacts of employment challenges have grown significantly, though progress remains uneven. In the past, issues like unemployment, workplace discrimination, and unsafe working conditions were often viewed purely through an economic or operational lens, with mental health implications largely being ignored. Today, there's a growing recognition of the links driving new policies and interventions, albeit with gaps in accessibility and consistency. For unemployment and depression, earlier eras prioritized economic recovery over mental health, leaving many unsupported. Recently, programs blending job placement and mental health services have emerged, though they remain inaccessible to many low income groups. Workplace discrimination, once overlooked as a psychological burden, is now addressed more frequently through diversity and inclusion initiatives. However, again, only a fraction of affected employees receive adequate mental health support. Movements like Me Too have amplified awareness of harassment's psychological toll, encouraging victims to report. Organizations are increasingly implementing anti harassment policies, though support for mental health recovery is inconsistent across the board. Similarly, PTSD support has grown in high risk industries such as first responders, while smaller industries are still lagging behind. Job instability and turnover, once essentially dismissed as normal, are now being tackled through career development programs and burnout. But burnout still remains a widespread issue. Work life balance has seen improvements as well, with flexible scheduling and remote work options, but again, challenges like the always on culture still persist. Workforce retraining programs now include psychological support, addressing the impacts of skill mismatching. Advocacy for migrant worker challenges has gained traction as well, with groups like the International Labor Organization making strides, though there's still significant barriers to this. Globally, workplace mental health awareness and interventions have risen by 20 to 40%, with high income regions leading the way. This progress, however, is not universal, as low income and informal sectors continue to face barriers in accessing mental health resources. The integration of mental health into workplace policies is a promising trend, but true equity requires extending these advancements to underserved groups and industries. But again, this is positive. This growing awareness has also spurred the development of solutions and resources, from mental health hotlines to organizational training programs and government funded initiative efforts are expanding to address these challenges. Yet, evaluating their effectiveness and ensuring equitable access will be key to sustaining and broadening the impact of these efforts. So, now, what are these solutions that are being spurred from the increase in awareness? Well, in addressing employment challenges, what solutions again exist? Who provides them and how effective are they? Well, for job security and unemployment, a range of support mechanisms are in place, including unemployment benefits, job retraining programs, career counseling, and public mental health initiatives. Now, these resources are typically provided by governments, workforce agencies, NGOs, and nonprofits. In Europe, unemployment benefits alone can lift 40 to 50% of recipients above the poverty line, while retraining programs have shown to enhance employability for up to 60% of participants. When it comes to wages and compensation, enforcing minimum wage laws, union negotiations for pay, and financial aid programs aim to address inequities. Employers, governments, and unions are the primary drivers of these measures. While regional policy variations exist, financial support programs have helped alleviate economic stress, though informal workers often remain out of reach. For workplace discrimination, solutions include anti discrimination training, comprehensive legal frameworks, and diversity programs. Employers, particularly HR departments, along with government bodies and advocacy groups, play a critical role. Now, these efforts are effective at reducing bias, but their success often hinges on organizational culture and enforcement. Similarly, addressing harassment and toxic work environments involves implementing anonymous reporting systems, zero tolerance policies, and workplace culture initiatives. Now, these measures increase accountability, though their impact varies widely across industries. When looking at workplace health and safety, enforcing compliance, promoting wellness programs, and offering PTSD specific care for high risk roles are essential. Governments, employers, and unions spearhead these initiatives with significant improvements observed in regulated industries, even as smaller sectors are still lagging behind. Legal protection and workplace rights have also seen progress. Strengthened labor laws, affordable legal aid, and worker advocacy initiatives are improving outcomes for workers, although enforcement gaps still persist. Flexible scheduling, career development opportunities, and employee recognition programs are now common retention strategies, helping reduce turnover and cutting burnout rates by 30 to 40%. Work life balance remains a critical area, with solutions like remote work policies, mental health days, and boundary setting workshops. While these reduce burnout, They also introduce new stressors tied to an always on work culture. Addressing skill mismatches and education gaps involves reskilling programs, school employer partnerships, and targeted job placement services. These have been successful in boosting placement rates for 60% of participants. And now, when looking at migrant and immigrant workers that face unique challenges, and solutions include legal support, cultural integration services, and mental health resources. Now, governments, NGOs, and employers are making incremental progress, though systemic barriers remain significant. Overall, however, solutions like unemployment benefits and employee assistance programs are showing promise. Flexible work policies have cut burnout by up to 40%, while counseling programs have reduced workplace stress by 25%. However, outcomes vary based on enforcement, accessibility, and regional contexts, with high income sectors often seeing better results. And now I want to shift gears a bit. What about the mental health consequences of these unemployment problems that we saw? What solutions are available for individuals suffering from job related mental illnesses? Well, for depression, common approaches include cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short, which achieves a 50 to 70% reduction in symptoms. And medications such as SSRIs, effective for moderate to severe cases. Lifestyle changes like regular exercise and can reduce symptoms by 20 to 30%, while alternative therapies such as mindfulness and yoga offer modest benefits. However, these methods require time, effort, and careful management of potential side effects, such as insomnia or nausea when it comes to the actual medication. For anxiety, again, CBT emerges as a leading solution, improving symptoms in 60 to 80% of cases. Medications like SSRIs and benzodiazepines provide relief, although the latter carries risks of dependency. Mindfulness techniques have also shown moderate success with 30 to 40% of symptom reduction. Addressing PTSD often involves trauma focused CBT and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, which provides symptom relief for 60 to 80% of sufferers. Support groups also play a role, helping 40 to 60% of participants with emotional support and coping strategies. Now, challenges here include the distress of reliving the trauma during the therapy session and potential medication side effects like dizziness. For self esteem issues, self comparison therapy and CBT improve confidence in 50 to 70% of cases. Workplace interventions such as anti bullying policies and inclusive environments, as well as career coaching, help restore self efficacy for 40 to 50% of participants. However, outcomes depend heavily on individual effort and therapists' relationships. So, general mental health solutions like CBT continue to demonstrate consistent effectiveness with success rates of 50 to 80% across conditions. Medications are most effective when paired with therapy, but their side effects must be managed carefully. Lifestyle changes and alternative therapies are valuable complementary strategies, though less effective as standalone solutions. And it's very important to stress and to note that treatment effectiveness depends on personal circumstances and adherence, emphasizing the need for professional oversight. And now I want to open up the discussion. So, as we can see, employment problems are a very, very large and heavy topic. However, opposed to the stats and the facts, there are stories that need to be also shared, which can help highlight how these problems affect people on a daily basis. For this, I'd like to welcome my incredible co-host Joe to the show and essentially launch the discussion on the first cause and or source of mental illness. So, Joe, welcome. And before handing off the mic to you, because I know you have something to say on this subject, I want to start by asking you a two-pronged question. First, I
Hmm.
want to ask you, did anything surprise you or stand out in the facts section that I just talked about? And two, how does this essentially relate to the experience you're going to share with us today?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot to to unpack. It's Honestly, the sheer information and the numbers that you presented, you're going 60, 80%, you're in, 30, 50%, you're in a very high percentile amount of people that are going through something, at least in regards to the workplace, right? Whether it's, in regards to self-esteem, whether it's in regards to, job securities, anxiety, uh, PTSD. There's a lot. Work-life balance is another crucial one where you see the numbers being, close to 60%, which is over, the halfway mark of a population. It's insane, especially, when you look in North America and you look at the work culture that's created, right? It's a very high amount. You kind of look at, I'm going to say the Nordic countries like Finland, Norway, Sweden, and you can see how they're taking maybe a little bit of a different approach to it now. And I think the numbers are testifying that, where, reducing work days. So instead of a 5-day work week, they want to bring it down to a 4-day work week, giving people more freedom. And I think we did an episode on quality of life, and you can see how their quality of life is different and how they're always trying to improve it. And that work-life balance, that switching your work week is changing that. As far as going to what I want to talk about, I've had experiences like that as well. For me, it had to do more with, I think, work-life balance, and then in return, because of that, self-esteem issues. I have some time here. So to give maybe the listeners a little bit of story, last year, actually exactly last year, I was going through something that's a little bit difficult to talk about, so bear with me on it.
Take your time.
Yeah. So I was going through something at work and my personal life that, took a lot out of me, which drove me to burnout, and when you're in that burnout period, everything just seems like it's going wrong. Even when things are going right, you're not looking at the things that are going right. You're looking at just basically everything going wrong. And it takes from your self-esteem. And it started when, I made a change of positions at work. And I'm not going to say I was the greatest in my position that I was previously in, but I would say I was maybe performing above my own expectations, which is a great feeling for anybody who's gone through it. And, you're just like, you're hitting your marks in everything you do. It feels great. You're performing well. Your numbers are well. You're exceeding. And in return, you feel freaking great for it. But then when you switch positions and then you're like, nobody's really giving you the proper training. Nobody's giving you proper descriptions of what your day-to-day is going to be like. Nobody's telling you this role, like, understand it's a 6-month training course and not a 2 or 3 week training course. And that's kind of what happened to me. I went from being the top to essentially like, hey, you mean shit here, right? And it's a different experience altogether. They sold me on something else, and then when I got there, it was something completely different. After 2-3 weeks, they were expecting me to go full throttle on a position that I didn't get proper training for. And because of that, right, you screw up and you make mistakes, and those big mistakes get amplified more and more, especially when you start going up, and that takes a toll on you, especially when you're not used to screwing up. And like, mistakes happen. But in this case, it was a little bit different. And it just felt like every day there was a different mistake, a different mistake, a different mistake. And that just kept shooting my self-esteem and my confidence lower and lower and lower, to the point where it was like, dude, I was scared to go into work. It's not like at that time, I did have managers that were giving me, I want to say the proper wording, that weren't giving me like positive reinforcement. It was like every time I got a mistake, it felt like it was more negative reinforcement upon the negative, that I typically would put on myself. Like, to give people maybe just a little bit more context, like when something goes wrong in my life, I don't try to look at blaming other people. I always look at myself first, and I go, what did I do wrong? How can I be better? Right. And then, like, through that, I try to find solutions and things like that. Like, I don't look at, this person fucked up. It's this person's fault. Like, I'm never that type of person. You know me personally. You know that I'm generally more like, I'll look at myself and scrutinize myself before I scrutinize others. So, when you're making mistakes and you're screwing up, and then your management is reinforcing that negative upon you, like, it beats you down, man. And I remember, like, my ex at the time, I was like calling her up and I was just in tears. Like, I was in tears almost every day for like 2 weeks. I remember October hit and it was like everything that went wrong could have gone wrong. I wasn't sleeping because every time I would go to sleep, I would have like nightmares that like my work phone was right next to me going off. I was scared for Saturday and Sunday. and especially Sunday night, because I knew that Monday I had to open up the laptop that I didn't want to look at all. And it fucks with you emotionally, man. Like it's not a good place to be in. And never did it cause depression in the sense where I'm like, oh, my life doesn't matter. But like, I can't tell you the amount of times that I was like looking up on the internet, like, can somebody fire you while you're still in training? What's your training period like? And it's not a good feeling to be in a mental state, because then you question everything around you. And you were kind of alluding to, right, when you're in self-esteem, you do a lot of the apologies. You apologize for everything and everyone. And I was at that point where I think like I was getting angry at things for no reason. And I was apologizing for my anger. Like I wasn't in a good place, like at all. And I laugh about it, but like, you know me, my laughing is my coping mechanism to when I'm not comfortable sometimes. But yeah, no, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the lightest spot in my life. And yeah, obviously I did the right thing. I booked time with a doctor, and you know, I think the guy after it was a very emotional appointment, to be honest with you. It wasn't easy not to talk about it, and then you know, also breaking down in the doctor's room over it. And then he knew right away. Like he recommended a therapist, and you know, like I know people like sometimes like shit on their exes and things, but the best thing she ever told me was, you know, call that therapist. And I did that right away the moment I got home. Like called him, booked an appointment 2 days later, and like ever since then I've been going. Like even now that I feel fine and I feel good about myself and all that, I still go, because you know, people will always tell you like, you go to therapy until you stop therapy, and it's like, yeah, but if you go for 2-3 weeks, you're not going to fix yourself over 2-3 weeks. Like it's consistency, it's going, it's talking to somebody, it's fixing things in your life that, you know, what caused you to have that burnout. Is there other factors involved and other things you want to improve on? So yeah, that's kind of my story. Maybe it's not the greatest description of a story, but like, yes.
Well, look, it's a perfect description because it falls in line with a lot of the things that the research kind of shows, right? What you went through is what thousands, if not millions, of people are going through, and that's what's important, and why it's important to share these stories, because it's important for people that go through this to know that they're not alone. This happens quite frequently, which is unfortunate. But I also want to ask you a follow-up question to that, and you started
Yeah.
talking about it a bit. What solutions did you have on hand? Who provided them, and how well did they work for you? And how long did it take? Because there is a problem, right? But it's also important to kind of showcase to people that here are the solution and pathways to get out of it.
Well, yeah. So the solution that I basically took was like, look, I knew I wasn't right. Like, dude, like, listen, man, when you're having breakdowns out, like when you're physically crying at your desk, you know, you're going home, it's your day off, and you're thinking about the next working day and you're crying because of it. When you're driving back home and it's a Friday night and already you're thinking about Monday, like for me, it was like, okay, like it's time to go get help. And that's when I, you know, luckily, yeah, we're in Canada, so you know, doctors are luckily available at times. I just remember booking a doctor appointment and going straight away, and was like, I'm not okay. Like I was able to kind of tell myself like, you know, this isn't me, this is not who I am. I'm not okay. And I went there right away, and it was like, you know, sat with him. He did a burnout test with me, asked me questions, and I remember like breaking down when giving him answers. And then he just told me right away, he's like, listen, like this is what I want you to do. So he kind of like gave me a plan, like a prescription. You know, like, you know, you're sick, you take a prescription. And like, yeah, I was sick in that moment in time. I was sick, like mentally I was sick. He's like, look, I'm giving you time off work. You know, I think it was about 90 days. And he's like, I want you to go to a therapist. And I went every week for the better part of 6 months. I was going to therapy, and now still going, but like a little bit of a reduced you know, therapy session, not every week, but like every 2 weeks. Sorry, which is nice. And for myself, it's like it gives you that mental space where you're like, okay, if things aren't going right, like yes, I have you, I have I have our other friends, I have you know, and stuff like that. But it's nice to go to a professional and get a professional's point of view. Not saying I don't trust you, I don't trust Carmen. You guys are great friends, but you know, you guys have both conflicting advice, right? And neither of you are trained professionals in that sense. So
Of
you
course,
know,
yeah.
I love my friends, but like, you know, a great support group, and sometimes you just need to get a professional's help too. So going to therapy really helped me. And then, even gym, getting back into physical shape was another crucial part. And it sounded like my doctor was telling me like, you need to go get into shape. It was more myself where it was like, listen, like staying at home, not having a routine, just kind of waiting around was never really part of me. And I'm someone who likes structure and likes routine, and it was like, okay, I'm going to be off for 90 days. Let me start building something up again, right? And you know me more than a lot of people do, and like I always loved going to the gym, and that kind of stopped for a while and didn't help me in that situation. So going to the gym was another huge part in that, and getting some physical exercise in and creating that routine.
Yeah, and that's amazing to hear. It's amazing to hear that you are in a better state, right? And that's important. And that's important to also talk about because it does work, right? Therapy and these processes that exist as solutions, they do work. Do they work 100% of the time? No, but that's every therapy, right? Advil itself doesn't have a 100% chance of curing you for a sickness, right? But it's good to see that the success rate of these therapies and these lifestyle changes are significantly high, and they do help people get out of this.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm like,
Yeah.
in my opinion, I think, and the numbers basically are backing it up for what I'm about to say here. When you look at the high numbers of this, I think people should at least, if you're not feeling 100%, if you're not well, you should have a therapist in a sense. Like, even if you have the greatest friends in the world, there's nothing to be scared of going. And I know for some people, maybe there's a stigma around it, right? Like, it's just, sick in the head, right? Like, you should be able to tell yourself, I'm not okay. And not being okay doesn't mean like you're depressed and you want to take your own life. Not okay sometimes can mean you're like we alluded to, you're burnt out, you're worn down. Like, at no point during that was I ever saying to myself, oh, my life's not worth living. It was just there was such a high level of stress and high level of anxiety, it starts to fuck with your mental ability, where you can't process, you can't think, you're not happy. Every day it was a battle with myself of, do I quit my job? And do I go to unemployment? Am I going to get fired from my job? It's better to quit than be fired. And all this because it was 2 months into the role, and nobody was training me. Nobody was telling me this. Nobody was telling me that. Nobody was giving me proper description. And go figure, the day before I leave, you get told, oh, well, it's 6 months. 6 months. After 3 weeks, you guys are going to feed me to the wolves. Like, it's not a good feeling. But yeah.
Yeah. And look, and again, I echo the same thing with you, right? It's important to speak to a therapist, and it's important to find professional help. Like you said, both me and our friend, we're here to support, but again, we're not professional therapists, right? We're not professionals in this. And this is coming from someone who did go through employment difficulties as well, didn't seek therapy, right? It's important to seek professional help when you're in that difficult state of mind. And yeah, I mean, they're there for a reason, right? They've been put in place for a reason. Just to very quickly speak on my situation on this podcast, because I think it's also important. I did not have a situation where I was mistrained. You essentially had mistraining, which led to anxiety, which led to depression, which led to self-esteem issues. I had harassment in the old job that I used to have, not the current one. I had harassment. And what do I mean by harassment? A lot of people kind of think of different things in terms of harassment, right? I had harassment in the form of fear. So management was harassing employees, essentially fearing them and essentially through their actions. Basically, you were afraid to take vacation. You were afraid to take a sick day. You needed to tell people where you were going on your vacation when you were taking it off. If you were sick, right, you needed to essentially, you were guilty until proven innocent, right? So all of those things, although if you look at it maybe for someone who's not working right now and they're going like, it doesn't sound that bad, it is. Because when you're working 40 hours a week, when you're working hours for a company, when your career is in the hands of the owners, right? And the thing is, this company was quite small, so we were in quite close proximity with the owners. And they have your career in the balance, and they can turn around and abuse you as much as they want, right? It really fucks with you. It really goes like I'm basically out in the wolves and completely on my own with this. I have no power here, no nothing. They were breaking, in my eyes, and looking back at it, every single employment law possible, right? They were right on the line of a lawsuit, right on the line of a lawsuit and what they were doing in the company, right? There were comments being made to women that shouldn't have been made at all. Like, this company did not have an HR department. Should tell you everything, right? It didn't have an HR department. We were getting in verbal spats. For crying out loud, how I'm going to ask you a question, Joe. If,
Yeah,
let's
go.
say, you ran a company and one of your employees came to you and said, "Hey, Joe, I decided to move forward with my career. I'm going to another company. I'm giving you my 2 weeks." How, in your mind, should an owner of a company react to that answer?
Well, thank them for their time and that they spent with us. Congratulate them on their new role. Ask them if there's anything, uh, that we could have done better. Process and it's like just thank them and start looking for a new replacement. I'm not an owner, so I can't really don't know if there's other steps you would take. But ideally, that's what I would do. Just thank you for your time. Wish you the best in your new role. Is there anything that we could have? Is it anything that we caused? And if so, is there anything that we can improve on for the next person? That's it.
Good. So that's a very fantastic question, and that's honestly what everyone should be doing. So this is what the one of the owners of the company did to this person. First of all, in the conversations in the back, because obviously he went to his office to give his 2 weeks to the owner. The owner basically harassed him into saying where he was going to go. So where are you going? Who's the competition? Why are you leaving? Where are you going? Who's the competition? The person in question, I'm not going to name drop here for their anonymity, refused to answer and said, "I'm not telling you. I don't have a responsibility to tell you. The only responsibility I have in my contract is I'm taking you my 2 weeks." The owner's answer: "I can sue you for leaving if you go to direct competition." So the person, again, who was giving his 2 weeks basically said, "Okay, I'm not telling you where I'm going," and left. He walked out. We were in this open floor setting where we're sitting down, right, and desks are next to each other. And I remember this guy, he was sitting, I think, on the other side of the room to me. We were working closely on a couple of projects, let's call them projects, right, on a couple of clients. And we were sitting down, right, and I remember he went to his desk. The owner came out and literally laid his hands on him, picked him up, and said, "Get the fuck out of my business," right? "Get the fuck out of here. You ain't gonna fucking be shit in this industry," blah, 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 and kicked him the fuck out. That's a lawsuit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he laid hands on an employee. That alone's a lawsuit.
Right.
But yeah, I was gonna say that's
And I have
pretty extreme.
personal experience from this. So we were in a period a couple of years ago that was extremely stressful in the financial markets. It was a financial company that I was working for. And for XYZ reason, I kind of have a temper as a character. I'll admit that. I'm a very temperamental person. I made an internal joke, internal. And when I mean internal, I mean highly internal, just for the group that we were of employees in the office that I was here in Montreal. And I made a joke that, fine, for whatever reason, might have not been appropriate. Or a joke that it wasn't directed to any employees. It wasn't directed to the company I was working for. It was directed to someone on the other line because I was doing cold calling to raise money that had insulted me. He had insulted me over the phone. Okay, fine. I was used to it. It's just cold call sales. That's how it is. And I had made a joke. As an owner, what would you do if you saw that type, let's say a joke that's a bit out of line? What would you do as an owner?
Well, you're saying a joke that's out of line, or
Yeah, like a tiny little comment that's out of line. It's, in all honesty, it's never going to be heard from the person that I had called, the potential client. It's just internal for all the employees.
dude, personally would be like I wouldn't. As an owner, I wouldn't even get involved. I would just, to be honest with you, that's a HR representative that should be talking to you if there's that much cruelty involved in the joke. You know what I mean? But like as an owner, it's not. You have other shit to do. Like it's a joke. Wasn't as long as it's not directed at him or anybody on the team, and
It wasn't.
it's directed, out of an experience you had, then like I said, to me, it's like you have better shit to do as an owner than to fucking worry about what's going on in a group chat, right? You
Right.
gotta kind of manage a company. That's why you have HR. If somebody filed a complaint with HR, then that's different, right? You have a conversation with HR, Theo. What the hell happened? What were you thinking of? What were you doing? Don't do that again. This is a reprimand, whatever. You never.
So it was never at that level. It was never directed at anyone within the company and nothing of that sort. So this is what the owner does. He gives me a personal call, and this is how the conversation went. Theo, you're a fucking asshole, and you're not going to become anything in this fucking industry with your fucking attitude.
Yeah, I just quit.
This is the owner of the company, one of the owners. One day later, I get a call from the other owner in Toronto that threatens me that if I ever speak up or do anything, I am fired on the spot from his company. So literally, this company breaking every sort of fucking employee violation out there. And then on top of that, I got laid off, which pushed me into unemployment for a year, which further fucked with my self-esteem and my mental health, right? As solutions, I didn't seek therapy. What I essentially did is I just overloaded the amount of CVs that I was sending out, went to the gym, and did a bunch of other essentially skill advancements, so to speak, a bunch of courses to get myself up to speed so I can maybe become a little more effective. But going back to the conversation we're having, this happens constantly. And I think there's an enormous problem, right? Because I unfortunately fell in the category of people that did not have that support from the company. They didn't have a way to go and fight for the rights. Now I'm in a very good company. I'll say this much, that if anything like this happens, there's resources to move, right? Companies like the one that I worked for previously exist, and abusers and pieces of shit, and I'm full on saying this without any rhetoric, abusers, inferiority complex assholes who run companies exist, right? The problem is there's no solution for the people working there. The solutions are outside. There should be very, very quick solutions for the people that reach out for outside help for these problems. There should be reprimand to these owners. Just because you have a company and you've made X amount of money does not mean you have the right to abuse your employee, right? So I think that's where I stand on that subject, in my genuine opinion.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I'm like, it's easy for me to sit here and be like, dude, you should just quit. Nobody deserves that backlash, right? But that's me coming from a perspective where like I don't have like, at least if I put myself in not your shoes, but like in maybe like my shoes were a year ago. Don't have a family, don't have kids, you're not paying rent. You're in a good spot where you can be like, well, fuck it, just quit, man. At the end of the day, that's maybe your side of things, right? But I'm not looking at it from a perspective of maybe who's somebody who has kids that they need to provide for,
Exactly.
a family they need to provide for, a mortgage they need to pay. It's like, it's different, right? Where if you're hearing that kind of stuff and you're doing that kind of stuff to your employees, like, there's a lot of extra pressure on that too, right? Because it's like, oh fuck, if I get fired tomorrow, how am I gonna pay the house? How am I gonna send my kids to school? How am I gonna put dinner on the table? For a lot of people, yes, they probably have some sort of backup plan, right? Where it's like, okay, like, look, this isn't the first time I have a feeling coming over me. Let me get the fuck out now, right? For others, maybe they don't. So it's different. It's situational, right? For me to say like, hey man, just fucking leave. But I get it. And at that point, man, you kind of have to tell yourself it's not you. It really is the employer. You know what I mean? It's something you're doing. It's him. And it sucks you're in that situation, obviously. And it sucks for anybody else going through that situation because it's not a situation. Shitty management is the worst in that sense, because this is why you have things like HR departments that are put in place, right? Because it allows the owners to be owners and do what owners need to do, right? Manage the company from a distance. Some of them pay the financing of the people who are in place to pay them money. So that's why when you hear verbal confrontations, when you hear, laying hands on employees, stuff like that, to me, my time to get to look to get out of that situation would have been the moment he put hands on somebody else. And that would have been, these don't align with my values. This isn't the company I want to work for. this is a sinking. Like I wouldn't even need to know what happened, but just kind of listening to it, you can kind of go like, okay, there's enough conclusive evidence here to be like, this is a sinking project, and me going down with the ship is gonna fuck me up even more. So it's like, let me get out now while I can. But again, it's easier said than done. Retrospective too. Hindsight's twenty
Yeah.
twenty in all situations. But again, situational, right? Like I said, somebody who needs the job, feeding families, things like that. Completely different to somebody who is, maybe a student, or maybe in our situation where it's kind of like, hey, I don't need this bullshit, and leave. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. I haven't been here long enough to even qualify you as a CV. And you know what? Truth of the matter is, I wouldn't even want them to call you anyways, because I don't know how the hell you're going to act on the phone. Like, you're not a reference for me. I don't care. I worked here. I'll explain it to people in an interview. But, like, in all honesty, can't do that. Suing somebody because they're moving positions, you can't fucking do that. I understand if maybe they're taking something in the same domain, you would kind of need to know because there's conflict of interest situations that pop up. But to threaten an employee with suing them for it and then putting your hands on them, I mean, you're not, like I said, owners are owners. Let them be owners. But this is why you have HR departments to deal with stupid shit like that. Had an owner who maybe isn't capable of managing or leading, right? Could sit back and be like, hey, I'm going to finance it. I'm going to have my say in some decision making. But at the end of the day, let me put managers in places. Let me put HR departments in places that can oversee the day to day projects and handle the day to day stress that clearly, by the sounds of it, they weren't able to manage.
Effectively, yeah. That's it. And yeah, and again, just to summarize this, before moving into the second kind of major mental illness source that I do want to talk about, there are solutions out there. So as you heard from both mine and Joe's stories, we've been through this, unfortunately. And it happens to, just as the statistics said in the facts episode, it happens to a wide range of people, right? There are solutions out there. There are sources, there is ways you can find help. And by all accounts, do speak up, do seek help, and there's no stigma against it. And with that being said, I want to move to the next section. This next section is another fact section. And as we explained at the beginning of the episode, we're going to be touching two major things for mental health coming from the World Health Organization. First one was employment problems. The second one is genetics. So let us turn our attention to another significant factor which influences mental health: genetics. Like employee issues, this is, again, a vast and complex area to explore. So let's start by defining what we mean when we talk about genetics in the context of mental illness. So, genetic influences can be categorized into two broad types: direct and indirect. Direct genetic influence refers to the biological and physiological mechanisms rooted in our DNA that directly impact mental health. These mechanisms affect critical factors like brain chemistry, including the regulation of neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine, as well as neural development and functioning. Additionally, certain mental health conditions such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder have a strong heritable component, meaning they can be passed down through families. Researchers use tools like genetic mapping, genome wide association studies, or GWAS for short, and familial studies to explore these direct links. On the other hand, indirect genetic influence stems from the psychological or social effects of inheritable traits. In these cases, the genetics themselves aren't directly responsible for mental illness, but rather the challenges arise from how these traits interact with the social environment and personal experiences. For example, a person with a genetically influenced short stature might face teasing or bullying, potentially leading to self esteem issues. Similarly, someone with a naturally shy temperament might struggle with external pressures, which could develop into social anxiety. The key difference between these two types of influence lies in their nature. Direct genetic influence operates through biological and internal processes, while indirect influence is shaped by social responses and the psychological impact of inheritable traits. Together, they illustrate the multifaceted role genetics plays in shaping our mental health landscape. And again, similar to the structure previously, who's really affected by this? To really deepen our understanding of genetic influences on mental health, let's break it down into the two main branches we introduced earlier: direct and indirect genetic issues. These branches encompass a variety of mental health illnesses, each with two prevalence and impacts. So let's explore these details. Starting with direct genetic issues, there are mental health conditions primarily influenced by inherited genetic variations. Among the most significant is schizophrenia, where 17 to 28% of the risk stems from genetics, with notable overlaps in genetic markers shared with bipolar disorder and depression. Globally, schizophrenia affects 0.3 to 0.7% of the population. Similarly, bipolar disorder shows a striking heritability, with 60 to 80% of the risk being genetic. Its genetic links overlap by 16% with schizophrenia and 10% with depression, which overall affect approximately 1% of the global population. Next, we have autism spectrum disorder, or ASD for short, which also falls within this branch of direct genetic issues, with an estimated heritability of 80%, often tied to a rare genetic mutation. In the US alone, 1 in 36 children is diagnosed with ASD, a number that has risen alongside improved awareness and diagnostic methods. Major depressive disorder, MDD, one of the most prevalent mental health conditions, carries a genetic risk of 30 to 40%, often overlapping with bipolar disorder and anxiety. Meanwhile, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD for short, has a heritability rate of around 70%, affecting 77.2% of children and 3.4% of adults globally. Now, shifting to indirect genetic issues. These involve mental health challenges that arise from societal or personal reactions to inherited traits. For example, physical traits like height or weight can attract criticism, leading to conditions like body dysmorphia or anxiety. In the US, body dissatisfaction affects 61% of adults. Similarly, inherited physical disabilities such as scoliosis or cleft palate can result in bullying, often culminating in depression. Ethnic or racial features also play a role, with 33% of minorities reporting appearance based discrimination, which contributes to chronic stress. Chronic illnesses with genetic links, such as sickle cell disease or diabetes, further illustrate this connection. Now, these conditions bring their own mental health challenges, with depression affecting up to 40% of those impacted. These indirect genetic influences underscore how societal perceptions of inherited traits can shape mental well being. Interestingly, the expression of these genetic influences often varies by gender. For instance, schizophrenia is more common in men, with a male to female ratio of 1.4 to 4. Conversely, women are more likely to experience bipolar 2 and rapid cycling forms of bipolar disorder. ASD shows a male to female ratio of 4 to 1, though females are often underdiagnosed. DD, however, is nearly twice as common in women as in men, while ADHD is diagnosed twice as often in males. Though differing symptoms, mutations in female may lead to underdiagnosis. Key statistics provide further clarity. In the US, 10.5% of children and 6% of adults are diagnosed with ADHD. Rising awareness and improved diagnostic techniques have increased ASD prevalence. And across various traits, 58 to 73% of individuals report experiencing body shaming comments that negatively impact their mental health. Now, these insights provide a comprehensive view of the direct and indirect genetic roles in mental health challenges, illustrating their prevalence and far reaching effects. And now that we've identified these types of prevalence and genetic issues in mental health, it's important to explore their causes. What leads to these conditions? So let's break it down again into direct and indirect influences. while also examining the environmental triggers that interplay with these factors. Starting with direct genetic issues, let's look at schizophrenia. Again, where genetic factors account for 17 to 18 to 28% of the risk. Having a first degree relative with schizophrenia significantly increases the risk, but genes alone don't tell the whole story. Environmental factors such as prenatal stress and adolescent substance use also play a critical role. Again, just to remind the statistic here, schizophrenia globally affects 0.3 to 0.7% of the population. And on a population of billions, we're talking about millions of people here. Bipolar disorder also has strong genetic roots. Again, let's go back to what we talked about, with a heritability estimated at 60 to 80%. Notably, there's a 16% genetic overlap with schizophrenia, as we've seen. Environmental stress and disruptions to sleep patterns can act as key triggers to this, contributing to the condition, which again affects about 1% of the population worldwide. Turning to autism spectrum disorder, ASD for short, we find heritability rates ranging from 37 to 90%, a wide range. Genetic factors related to brain development are significant here, but other factors like advanced parental age or exposure to prenatal toxins can elevate the risk. Today, ASD is diagnosed, and again, remind the statistics here, in 1 in 36 children in the United States, a number that reflects both genetic influences and increasing awareness. Major depressive disorder, MDD, is another widespread condition, with genetic factors again accounting for 30 to 40% of the risk. External triggers, including life stressors and chronic health conditions, further exacerbate the likelihood of depression. Interestingly, however, as we've seen before, women are nearly twice as likely as men to experience MDD, underlining the interplay between genetic susceptibility and societal pressures. Finally, when looking at attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, this is one of the most terrible mental health conditions, with, again, reminding the statistics here, genetics influencing roughly 75% of cases. Genes related to dopamine regulation, such as DRD4, are often implicated. Environmental factors such as prenatal exposure to alcohol or tobacco also contribute to ADHD. And again, just to remind the statistics of how prevalent this affects 7.2% of children and 3.4% of adults globally. Now, moving on to the indirect genetic issues. Again, these arise from societal and psychological responses to inherited traits. For example, physical traits can become a source of dissatisfaction. Let's remind a key statistic here. In the US, 61% of adults report body dissatisfaction, which often stems from societal pressures and can lead to conditions like body dysmorphia or anxiety. Similarly, physical disabilities such as muscular dystrophy can result in stigma and depression. Another key thing here, as we spoke about before, ethnic and racial features are another indirect factor, with 33% of minorities reporting experience appearance based discrimination, which contributes to chronic stress and anxiety. Chronic genetic illnesses like sickle cell disease that we spoke about before also highlight the indirect role of genetics. These conditions are often accompanied by depression, with prevalence rates reaching up to 40% in affected groups. And this also brings about social isolation and uncertainty about the future, which only intensifies these psychological impacts. This exploration of causes provides a nuanced understanding of how genetic and environmental dynamics converge to really shape mental health outcomes. It also emphasizes the complexity of addressing these issues, requiring both biological insights and societal change. But okay, so now we know how they're created. But what type of mental illnesses are essentially triggered? When discussing indirect genetic issues, we step into a realm where biological inheritance intersects with societal perceptions, biases, and environments. Unlike direct genetic causes, which stem from physical imbalances or chronic medical conditions, these issues arise from how inherited traits are viewed or experienced by the individual and society. The mental health impacts are wide ranging. So let's delve into the mental illnesses that often stem from these indirect influences. First, let's consider physical traits, such as height, body size, or skin color. These attributes, though purely genetic, can become focal points for criticism or bullying, leading to profound mental health challenges. Adolescents, in particular, are vulnerable. Those with body image concerns are 3.7 times more likely to report depressive symptoms. The rise of social media has amplified these pressures, with 87% of young users reporting negative impacts on their body image due to unrealistic beauty standards. Next, inherited physical disabilities such as muscular dystrophy or Down syndrome represent another indirect genetic issue. Now, these disabilities often bring about chronic mental health challenges such as depression and anxiety, which are fueled by social stigma and the physical limitations that these individuals face. Isolation is a major factor here, as people with disabilities are at higher risk of being socially excluded, a key driver of depression. A striking 42% of individuals with visible disabilities report frequent depressive symptoms, highlighting the mental toll of living with these conditions. Next, we examine ethnic or racial features, which can also become a source of mental health. Distress due to societal discrimination is quite often here. Experiences of racism can trigger conditions like anxiety, depression, and even PTSD when the trauma is repeated. Identity conflicts, often rooted in internalized racism or societal exclusion, can erode self esteem. Research shows that minority groups subjected to regular discrimination are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop depression, demonstrating how deeply these societal issues cut into mental well being. Finally, the chronic genetic illnesses such as sickle cell anemia or Huntington's disease, these conditions bring not only physical suffering but also significant psychological burdens. Depression often stems from the ongoing pain and uncertainty tied to the disease's progression, while the visible effects of these illnesses can lead to stigma and social withdrawal. Between 30% and 50% of individuals living with chronic genetic conditions report experiencing depression, underscoring the dual physical and mental toll of these diseases. So, across these areas, physical traits, inherited disabilities, racial features, and chronic illnesses, the mental health impacts are really profound. Depression, anxiety, and self esteem challenges are common among outcomes, and they are often exacerbated by societal biases, stigma, and a lack of adequate support systems. This reality calls for greater advocacy, inclusive environments, and stronger mental health resources to help individuals navigate these challenges and lead fulfilling lives. And I want to switch gears here a bit to on a slightly more positive note. I want to speak about the awareness around these. So let's explore how awareness of both direct and indirect genetic mental illnesses has evolved over the years. The progress we've made in understanding and addressing these conditions has been significant, but it also highlights areas where work remains. Starting with schizophrenia, awareness has certainly improved. Public education campaigns and community initiatives have made strides in reducing stigma. However, negative stereotypes still linger, and misconceptions about the condition remain widespread in many areas. While the conversation is shifting, full societal acceptance is yet to be achieved. For bipolar disorder, research has illuminated its links to suicide risk and substance abuse, creating a deeper understanding of the condition. This heightened awareness has helped improve recognition and treatment, especially for managing its most severe aspects, like suicidability. Still, challenges persist in ensuring that these insights translate into consistent care for those affected. When it comes to autism spectrum disorder, or ASD for short, the shift in perception has been remarkable. Today, autism is increasingly seen through the lens of a neurodivergence rather than as a disorder, leading to reduced stigma compared to other conditions. The neurodiverse community, through advocacy and education, has been instrumental in fostering social acceptance and promoting inclusion, paving the way for a more empathetic approach to autism. For major depressive disorder, or MDD, awareness has grown tremendously over the past few years. As one of the most common mental health conditions globally, it has been the focus of public health campaigns, digital platforms, and advocacy movements. Now, these efforts have lowered many barriers to care, making it easier for people to seek treatment, although accessibility gaps persist in underserved regions. With ADHD now, recognition has expanded significantly, especially concerning adult ADHD, which was long overlooked. Earlier diagnoses and tailored treatments are now more common, thanks to increased awareness. Schools and workplaces have also embraced a better understanding of ADHD, fostering environments that are more supportive and accommodating for those with the condition. So, on a broader scale, the integration of mental health care into general healthcare systems has been a game changer. Holistic approaches are becoming the norm, recognizing mental health as a critical component of overall well being. Yet, stigma remains a pervasive barrier, particularly for conditions like schizophrenia and severe mood disorders, where societal biases are still deeply ingrained. So, in brief summary, because there was a lot of information in this, in summary, the past few years have seen significant and meaningful progress in raising awareness and improving care for genetic mental health conditions. However, the journey is far from over. Efforts must continue to combat the stigma, ensure equitable access to resources, and create environments where everyone, regardless of their diagnosis, feels supported and understood. And again, now I want to wrap this section up with really highlighting and ending on a positive note with the solutions. So again, to wrap up on a positive note, let's really explore the solutions and resources now available to support those grappling with mental health conditions linked to the direct and indirect genetic factors. Thanks to increased awareness and research, these interventions are more accessible and effective than ever before. For direct genetic conditions such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, autism spectrum disorder, major depressive disorder, and ADHD, the most effective approaches combine medication therapy and robust support systems. So let's break that down. For schizophrenia, antipsychotics like risperidone or clozapine manage symptoms with 60 to 80% effectiveness, while cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can improve functionality and reduce symptoms by up to 50%. Support systems such as family therapy and rehabilitation programs are invaluable for improving reintegration and quality of life. When it comes to bipolar disorder, mood stabilizers like lithium reduce manic episodes by 60 to 80%, and combining them with therapies like CBT or psychoeducation decreases depressive episodes by 40 to 50%. Additionally, lifestyle changes such as better sleep, hygiene, and stress management play a key role in maintaining emotional balance. For ASD, early intervention is crucial. Applied behavior analysis, or ABA for short, has shown 50 to 60% improvement in enhancing communication and social skills when implemented early. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, and educational interventions further aid integration, while medications are used sparingly for specific symptoms like irritability, with a success rate of 40 to 60%. In treating MDD, antidepressants, particularly SSRIs and SNRIs, alleviate symptoms for 50 to 60% of patients. CBT is equally impactful, reducing symptoms by up to 60% when combined with therapy and medication, and this can actually increase the achieved effectiveness by around 70%. For treatment resistance cases, advanced methods like electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, and transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, are highly effective. Finally, for ADHD, stimulants such as Ritalin improve focus and impulse control with a success rate of 70 to 80%. Behavioral therapy helps build coping strategies, especially when combined with medication, while support services like academic accommodations or structured routines significantly enhance outcomes. Finally, moving to indirect genetic factors. Solutions focus on addressing the societal and emotional impact of traits like physical appearance, disabilities, racial features, and chronic illnesses. Therapies like CBT are effective in tackling body image concerns, improving self esteem by 40 to 60%. Support groups also play a critical role in mitigating feelings of isolation and enhancing resilience. However, interventions like cosmetic surgery often yield mixed long term mental health outcomes, with dissatisfaction persisting in 25 to 30% of cases. For individuals with inherited disabilities, therapy helps build mental resilience, reducing anxiety and depression by 40 to 60%. Assistive devices foster independence, indirectly improving mental health, and community support groups have a profound 70 to 80% positive impact on mental well being. For those facing stigma or discrimination due to ethnic or racial features, therapy methods like CBT and interpersonal approaches reduce symptoms by 50 to 70%, while community based cultural empowerment programs alleviate internalized stigma and improve mental health. Advocacy for systemic anti racism efforts complements these approaches, although their individual impact is harder to quantify. Finally, for those managing chronic illnesses with genetic links, CBT and acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, improve coping strategies with 40 to 70% effectiveness. Medications such as SSRIs can reduce co occurring symptoms of depression or anxiety by 50 to 70%, and support groups which provide emotional relief and practical coping strategies benefit around 70% of participants. So, in conclusion, the combination of medication, therapy, and support systems forms the backbone of effective treatment for both direct and indirect genetic mental health challenges. Now, while individual outcomes can vary, these interventions, when applied holistically, consistently deliver success rates of 50 to 80%, offering hope and improved quality of life to the millions which are affected. And like before, I want to bring back my co host, Joe, because again, there are stories to talk about here, and there are experiences that I think both of us have had. So, kind of similar to the last section and the last question that I kind of posed to you when I handed off the mic. One, do you have first of all, did anything stick out as interesting here through these fact sections? And secondly, on the story that you might share, if you're comfortable, is there anything that relates to the statistics or the information?
So there's a lot that stuck out, right? The genetic part, the ADHD, the MDD. There's a lot more than I would have thought that would have gone into this. Chronic
Mhm.
illness. That's another interesting one. The ethnic and racial features. That's another one. Inherited disabilities, indirect genetic factors. So there's more than even I thought was possible. And again, the things that stick out to me the most are just it's the high percentages. It's not like 10, 15%. It's not 10, 20%. It's 50 to 70%, 70 to 80%. 90%. It's not small numbers, and that's the thing I think people don't acknowledge. And a lot of the time it always feels like, when you have these conversations, it's always like, well, you're just one and that's it. It's just you. Just move on, get going. Where when you think about it, there's so many other people that are at play.
Exactly. And just to touch on the thing that you were talking about, just look at schizophrenia. That's zero point 0.3 to 0.7% of the world population, which is 7 billion. You're talking about tens of millions of people globally who suffer from this. And this is a hereditary mental illness. This is passed on through genetics. Yes, there are, as we saw through the fact section, there are, I would tend to say, external factors that can affect it, such as prenatal exposure to toxins that can cause that. But for a large portion of it, it's hereditary. ADHD, actually, when I was doing the research, stuck out to me as, oh my God, this is insane. 75% heritability. So if one of your relatives has that, if your mom or dad, for example, you have a 75% chance of having it as well. So it's not just, it's not, you don't get it. Yes, there can be external factors again, but 75% is a huge amount. I think MDD as well was an enormous heritability amount. So it struck me a lot, especially the direct genetic links to that. Kind of a story that I want to share, and maybe I can pass it on to you for yours,
Yeah.
has to do really with indirect. So, an indirect, as we saw, kind of splits a lot in a variety of things. The one that I fall into and the one that I've had negative experiences with is unfortunately with physical traits, right? I am not the tallest person in the world. I'm not a basketball player. And I'm not 6'5", right? And I'm average height, right? I'm 5'8", average height, I would tend to assume. However, and this is another key statistic that I found while doing the research, social media has greatly negatively affected this, has negatively affected physical traits and how people are essentially perceiving these physical traits in the public. I have had negative experiences with that, especially in the dating scene, right? Especially being rejected for my height a lot of times. Now, there's an interesting thing to talk here, right? Where you can make an interesting point of, hey, this is just another person's preference, right? And that's a fair assessment, right? That's a completely fair assessment. But where does the line start to end when millions start getting affected negatively from this? I'm not saying that everybody should start compromising what they like, sure, but how much of what you like is irrealistic or not actually representative of the real world? That's a bigger question that needs to be asked, and that's why I want to bring up a bit my story on this, right? And this brief experience, and I want to open the conversation to you very quickly. There's, especially with social media, there's this unrealistic expectation of what, and it's going for both men to women. I'm just talking from my perspective as a man, right? But as a man, there's an unrealistic ideology out there of what the perfect man is. Something that makes it extremely difficult for someone that doesn't fall in that perfect category, because we don't. None of us do, right? Makes it extremely difficult to find anyone. And that's a big portion, right? Because it does affect your self esteem. You start asking yourself, am I even remotely good enough for this, right? And it can lead to depression, as we've seen. It can lead to a bunch of other issues. So I want to kick the ball in your court and kind of see of your opinion on this factor. Do you think that we've gone overboard with what we expect?
So when you're saying what we expect, you're basically implying like kind of what women perceive they need in a man or the looks.
In a way, yes, both men and women, though, right?
Okay, no, I
Yeah,
know. I assumed it was for both.
yeah,
Just
yeah, exactly.
going off the conversation.
Do we have a skewed view of what a normal
Yeah,
person
of
from the
course we do.
opposite gender is?
Yeah, of course we do. Of course, 100% we do. Again, for me, maybe I just think it's obvious because of I guess studying marketing and stuff like that, where it's very clear. And it's everywhere across the world has a different opinion and perspective of beauty, right? North Americans might view something completely different than let's say Germans. And the reason why I'm saying North Americans, I basically mean Canada and the United States, because it's very similar on how we market certain products in both countries. There's a little bit of differences, but like at the end of the day, it's more or less kind of marketed the same. Mexico is probably different than the way they market it in the States. Beauty, again, to me, I just always look at it as like beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, right? I think everybody has different perceptions of what makes somebody good looking, what makes somebody not good looking. That's why everybody interprets art differently than somebody else, right? At the end of the day, though, can you say that social media has affected the way certain individuals should look? Yeah, yeah, without a single ounce of doubt in my mind, the answer is yes. And this was our first episode, which, by the way, is our number one most streamed episode on Spotify. Shameless plug, but it's true. No, no, but it is true though.
Yeah.
Social media has played such a factor in the way people perceive beauty, and I think you even alluded to it with the indirect genetic factor point of view. It's like people go to social media and they're like, this is what I need to look like, right? And I say for both men and women, right? And maybe that's kind of indirectly what you want to look for in a partner as well. You know, for women, right? You might not be a freaking size 0 or double 0 or whatever the frick the numbers are. I don't know. You know, for men, you might not be a small or a medium. You might be like myself, an XL, 2XL, 3XL. Again, everybody's different. Nobody is the same. That's why, right? I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of looked away more and more from social media, and I kind of look at people's individualism more than I look at somebody's, looks, because, as you get older, you kind of realize, dude, the looks are going to eventually fade. They're not going to be there forever. I think, but the person behind the looks is so much more crucial than the person and the way they look, right? So for myself, I always look at somebody's individualism, like tell me more about you. Like what's the nitty gritty on you?
FBI
Like
Joe over here wants to know everything about you.
no, but like seriously,
But
like
yeah,
tell them like what are your
seriously,
passions?
yeah.
Like what are your passions? What do you love to do? What are your favorite things in music? And like I find those people that like focus so much on social media, man, they have no passions. It's what do you love to do? I love to travel. Who fucking dose to you? We all want to travel. Fucking tell me something about you, the person, you. And it's like they don't know who they are because they're so fascinated on like, I need to be the perfect, what I see on social medias, right? And I blame social media for that because people are on their phones way too much nowadays, where I feel like people are so numb to it. They're like, social media is like this and like that, and like that's what I need to be. This is the perfect person. Meanwhile, there's just like me and you that like I think we're so off the grid nowadays. We don't know what the hell's going on. Like we're just following news cycles, talking to people, and I think me and you grew up in two different, like the same time, but like the same way,
Yeah.
in a sense where it's like, I didn't have a smartphone till practically I was in college.
Yeah.
So it would have been, for the international viewers, it would have been uh, senior in high school. I would have been 16, 17.
Exactly.
So, and I'm pretty sure for you yourself as well. You still have the same smartphone I've seen you with since you were 18, which is kind of freaking amazing because that thing is like
No,
11
I've
years
actually
old.
switched it.
My bad. I'm sorry. It's still the Galaxy S3 or 4. I think it's freaking 7 generations old at
No,
this
I
point.
had the S3 for a very long time. Now I'm on the S10, which I've had also for a very long time because I don't switch tech too often.
Yeah, there you go. Kudos to you, man. But like at the end of the day, I'm just trying to say is like, yes, people view themselves, I think they look at social media and they're like, I need to do this to be the perfect person. Where in reality, it's like, no, you don't. Like not at all. And like, yeah, you might not be a size 00. You might not be a size whatever, small, medium. You might not have the biggest muscles. You might not have, a full lock of hair. I mean, God, how many people do, as you get older? But I think as you get older, the less and less you realize how stupid it is, But I think when you're young, you're very much perceptive to it. And yeah, to answer your question.
Yeah. Follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting conversation and I think it ties heavily into mental health. This whole social media, and yes, we talked about it in the past. I think it's a conversation that we should have again, just because it's such a big topic. These unrealistic beauty standards, do they, in your opinion, because I have my opinion on it, and I think you know my opinion on it,
Well, yeah.
do they affect how people give opportunities to other people, whether it be men to women or women to men? Give you an example. Give you an example just for the audience to essentially understand what I'm trying to say, so it don't sound too cryptic. Does the unrealistic beauty standards for men, because they do exist as much as we don't talk about them, as they exist for women as well, does the fact that women have this set mindset for a good chunk of time through social media that a man has to be above a certain height, does that block them from giving opportunities to other men? other men who might be just perfect for them, or other men that might be good for them. So, and does that in and of itself lead to mental illnesses such as depression or self-esteem issues to the men that are not being selected?
Man, I feel like my answer is a little bit. I mean, no disrespect, Theo, because I know our short kings out there are very are very listening to this right now with a lot of intrigue. Listen, if I'm speaking in general, then yes. But like I said, I don't think I don't. I like to not think that every woman looks at a guy and goes like, well, he's not 6'4", not 6'5", so fuck it, I'm going to ignore him, right? And to be fair with you, I think when you're young, and it kind of goes back to what I said before, right? When you're young, you're so susceptible to what social media has to tell you, right? Like, dude, I think at one point the most popular song in the world during the summer was "I Need a 6'5" guy in finance."
Yeah.
Like, not to say anything, but like the realistic expectation of finding a guy who's 6'5" is very low. The average human height is like what, 5'8", 5'9" for men,
Yep.
maybe 5'6" for women. It's not like being tall is freakishly not normal. I mean, I'm an exception. Thank you very much. But like, but like, needless to say, it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. And I like to assume, and I would like to think and believe that most women, when they see a guy, yes, looks always are going to play a factor into it, right? Again, you're also attractive to a certain individual for a reason, all right? Most of that might have to do with your looks. The way you look is crucial to that too, right? I feel like me and you are going to have an in-deep conversation right now, but it doesn't feel like, you shouldn't be like, oh, because this girl doesn't look at me the way I look at her, doesn't mean no other girl's going to look at me the same way, right? I think most people look at it and it's like rejection's a hard thing, right? Sometimes you might look at somebody and be like, oh, she's perfect for me, but she doesn't see you in that way. And it hurts, it stings, right? And you make that assumption that everybody is like that because I had this one bad experience, and that that's normal to have. That's how most brains are triggered, right? You generalize off of your events that have happened to you. But I like to think there's somebody for everybody. And like I said, I think as you get older, and men and women both, I think you start to value other things than looks, right? I think having a career is important. I think having, like I said, individualism is just as important as having anything else, because like I said, eventually your looks are going to fade. As you get older, you're going to start to bald, you're going to start to pack on the weight because you can't physically be active every day. It's just unrealistic. Even getting older, eventually injuries are going to happen, you're going to start to slow down in that space. But the brain and who the person is inside is more valuable than what they bring outside. But that's just me. That's just my opinion. That's just
No, and it's
Joe's thoughts.
and it's good because it echoes my opinion as well, right? The unfortunate thing to say, and I think you said it correctly at the start, is when looking broadly, the answer is yes, it does, right? It does affect. However, it shouldn't. It realistically shouldn't, as you correctly said. And I wanted to, before kind of passing the mic over to you to maybe share your experiences in this kind of section of mental illnesses, which is genetics. I do want to say this for people out there that might be suffering from mental illnesses caused, whether it be directly or indirectly. And I'm going to speak more about directly because it's something that I've experienced. If you need help, again, do seek help. Do find help. Do things that are going to help you positively. And if that means stepping away from social media, then step away from social media. If that means that you need to seek therapy and professional help, seek therapy and professional help. And I'm advocating it as a person who's never gone to professional help. It works, it helps, and it's very important. And I just wanted to say that. So now I want to kind of pass it over to you. Have you had any experiences with genetics?
With genetics, yes, but I would say it was more to do with
Yes. Okay.
indirect factors. I mean, look, my whole life, I want to say I've always been like the tallest kid in a classroom. I've always been the biggest guy in the classroom. I think at one point when I was in like grade 5 or 6, I was already like, 5'10", 5'11". Like I really like, one of these days, I think me, you, and everybody else, maybe over the holidays, we'll look over some photos and I'll show you guys the truth. Like I was freakishly tall and big, like at a young age. Like I had my growth spurts like quite quickly. I think it came back from summer break. I was never like class average. So, with that comes a lot of bullying. And you're a kid and you're trying to like, you see everybody else and they're short and you're just freakishly standing above everybody else. People obviously want to attack you. And you know me and like we've known each other for a better part of close to a decade, 11 years almost. How many times, Theo, have I ever looked at somebody and be like, no matter what they've told me, have I ever looked at somebody and be like, yeah, I'm going to start a fight with this individual?
Never.
Yeah.
Absolutely
How
never.
many times? How many times do I keep my mouth shut a lot of the time?
Every time.
Every
I'm
time.
actually the one who tells you, no, you should say something. I'm actually the one who says something.
But you know me, like I
Yeah.
don't pick fights with
Yeah.
people. I don't engage in fist fights. I don't engage in getting angry and starting verbal jabs. And like trust me, if we want to go verbal jab for verbal jab, I'll gladly verbal jab you. There's no problem on that sentiment for my part now that I'm getting older. But like when I was younger, like forget about it. Like I would never talk back to somebody if somebody were like calling me names and shit. I would just try to like put my head down and like just try to focus on myself, right? But as a kid, that's the way it used to be. So I would like constantly go into school. I would be bullied because I'm overweight and slightly tall, and it's like and all that, and kind of like what I said at the beginning, right? With the work aspect, with this aspect, it was kind of the same thing. Just every day was consistently getting bullied, consistently getting bullied, consistently getting bullied. And I remember, I think it was close to my 10th birthday, and I was watching Team Canada Olympic curling, and they won gold. And it was during spring break. It was a week before my birthday. I think I was turning like 10 years old or something. And I was watching it, and then all of a sudden I started thinking about like school randomly and like getting picked on. I remember my heartbeat just like going straight into a panic attack. Like I literally thought I was having a heart attack. Like as a 10-year-old, it's not a good feeling to have at all. Like, I remember I was at my grandmother's and she's like, I start freaking out. So it's like she calls my mom, and then my mom comes and 911 and like all this type of stuff. Because like I was a kid, dude, I was like freaking out. My
Yeah.
heart rate was like 165, 166. And I remember going to the hospital, having tests run on me and all that type of stuff. Like it's hard. Like I've never really talked about this. I don't think I've ever even talked about this with you, and I'm just saying it now for the first time. But it's like that was such a traumatizing experience to go through, and it's like that happens, and then you're going back to school, right? A place you don't want to be, and like I would remember going to classes and having that panic attack come up again. I remember like going like I remember once like walking down the hallway and there was nobody there, and I just felt my heartbeat like just suddenly increase. And I remember like walking into, I guess it was a counselor's room, like, oh my god, I think I'm dying. And then my grandmother came in and like I remember that point in time and like just how badly it was. I never really kind of fully recovered from it, till like 2-3 years later, because there was no such thing as burnout back then. There was no such thing as switching schools. But like I remember when I got to grade, like things maybe a year and a half for me to get back to normality. Like I the summer staying away from it helped me a lot. And then going back for my senior year, I felt normal because I had that time away from school. And then also those kids that were bullying me were no longer there. So that helped quite a bit. And I was able to like really be myself and all that. And I think even in high school, I was still never like, shocker, I was still very much, a big kid and like didn't want to express myself because of it. Then I remember I got to college and meeting you and meeting, Carm and all that. You guys really got me out of my shell more and more and more and more, and like it helped a lot. Because I remember in high school, like I was always that kid that would like shut up and like be quiet, and nobody really got to know who I was as a person because I was so battered at that time. And I remember the only time I would like really be able to be myself is like in gym class, because like I knew I was fucking good at sports. Whether it was basketball, hockey, football, whatever it may be, like I knew I was good in that shit. So, when I was there, it was like, yeah, I'm fucking great. Like, like I'm the fucking shit. But yeah, like yeah, it was it was rough.
Yeah, man. And look, and I went through that as well as a little kid, especially in elementary school. I was, if you would have seen me, I was a chubby. I wouldn't even say chubby. I would say overweight. I was significantly overweight. Again, I was short. I'm a short person, right? I'm 5'8". I wasn't, and I was extremely overweight. And it got to a point where in elementary school, I was not only being physically bullied. Actually, I still remember one of the jokes, the insults that would hurled at me. With one kid would telling me what size bra I was wearing because I was overweight. I used to get physically beaten up, bleeding lips, and all that. One of the reasons why I started martial arts at 4 years old was because of the bruises. My parents put me in a martial arts school. They're like, hey, you got to learn how to defend yourself. And I remember, I think it was grade five to grade six. If I'm not, actually, it started, I think, at grade five. I was in such a bad state that I was just breaking down for no reason in the hallway. Right, my mother, which was a stay-at-home mother, had become a lunch mother at the time. Essentially, lunch mothers, for those who don't know, they're mothers that usually show up during lunch. That's what they're called, lunch mothers, to watch over the kids if they're staying inside or going outside. So my mother, who was seeing me in such high levels of distress, I mean, when I'm saying high levels of distress, I was talking about suicide at the age of like 8. So as a mother, she's like, no, I'm going to sign up as a fucking, a lunch monitor to see what the hell is happening. And I remember one time I was walking from the outside going inside. My mother wasn't in my classroom. She was taking care of another classroom. And she saw me just bawling my tears out, like completely crying and breaking down because of bullying. And I remember after that, I think every single lunch, I wasn't spending it outside with kids. I was spending it in therapy at school because it was necessary. And then high school didn't really get any better. I mean, physical bullying had stopped, but kind of the ostracized, I don't know how to say it, like being ostracized, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. That's the correct.
Right, was still there. The only real time I came out of my shell, and kind of like you with sports, the only thing that I kind of stood out to was presentations, public speaking, i.e., what we're doing right now, and theater. Was the only times that I kind of, okay, this is my time, just leave me alone, this is all I'm doing. But all the other cases, very quiet. And that carried into college. I remember, I don't know if you remember, but we've had conversation in college where I was in a broken state in terms of not only mentally, in terms of the rejection that I was facing due to my physical height and my body and my looks, but also the amount of suicidal thoughts that I was having during that period, right? And even going as far as almost attempting it, right? So I've been through that. The unfortunate thing is that I didn't seek therapy, right? What I did was coped with it on my own. And what did that mean? Essentially, shutting up, toughing it out, being extremely tough on myself and going to the gym and working out, right? Which it does in an extent work, but I believe genuinely if I had taken the action and actually gone to therapy, it might have helped me a lot more to essentially at least heal these scars, right? A lot faster, actually. And that's a question that I do want to toss back to you. When you were facing these things in high school, when you were facing these things in elementary school, and yeah, you touched on it, especially with me and our friends Carm that kind of pulled you out of your shell in college. And by the way, for the audience out there, college is not university in Canada. College is its own little thing for 2 years before we fuck off to university. But what did you do? What did you search for coping mechanisms? What did you find?
Just kind of like you, right? Like, dude, our parents, didn't or don't believe in, especially back then, really didn't fucking believe in therapy. So, like, when their kid is like that, it's always like, like you got to stand up for yourself. You got to fight back. You got to do something about it. And it was just always like, yeah, but like that's not me. Like, I'll never like take jabs at somebody or punch somebody. But why do you sit closer? And I'm like, I always had this phobia of sitting in front of the class because, again, I'm always scared like the person behind me couldn't see the freaking board, right? So because they couldn't see the board, I was gonna get like pelted with some shit because like couldn't see crap. So I always sat in the back. Yeah, and it was weird because like the friends I met in high school, like they guess we were the same kind of like group of people. We all had our, like, we were never to say it the best, we were never the popular kids. And I look back on my time in high school and I just like sit and I go like, thank God I fucking wasn't. Thank God I wasn't a popular kid in high school. It seems like they're fucking boring as shit. Like I look back and I'm like yeah, I didn't go to parties. I didn't go to well, I didn't go to like the the bigger parties or what have you. But like we used to do laser tag.
Yeah.
We used to do like axe throwing. We used to do like shit like that in high school. And it's like I look back, I'm like, yeah, I didn't get drunk every weekend. People who don't only drinking age is like 18 in Quebec, but like
Yeah.
get alcohol a little bit earlier. It's like I didn't get that high school life, right? But I can say though, I made a lot of good friends in that time, and I enjoyed it. And I was never like part of that clique that was like, you gotta smoke weed, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. You gotta go drink, you gotta be if you want to be part of the cool group. And it was like, I don't care about being part of a cool group. It's just a status that means absolutely nothing at the end of the day. We're all gonna leave here, we're all gonna go do our own things. I look back on it, or I look back at those people that were cool groups, and I'm like, I look where they're at in their life, and I look at where I'm at in my life. And, it's two very different paths that diverged at one point, and it's like they're doing their own thing, and I'm happy doing what I do, and that's it. And that's the way it should be. And some of them maybe wised up and didn't wise up. But to answer your question in general, still, sorry, I got a little bit of off
No, that's
track there
fine.
from what you were asking.
That's fine.
No, like I said, just kind of just put it away and was like, kind of just told myself, I'm like, if I really wanted to, I could kick their fucking asses. It sounds stupid to say. It's like, but like, I'm like, if I really wanted to, and it really came down to it, and it was like me versus them in a one-on-one, like I got the size advantage, I have the skill advantage. I can fight if I need to fight, but I'm not gonna fight. I don't need to fight. I don't need to fight to prove anything. If this, 5'1" short king, to be exact here. I don't want to damage your branding that you have going for you right now. Needs little big dick energy, because clearly whatever it is isn't working for him and he needs it. Then by all means take a swing, man. But like, just know I can, if I wanted to, and I could, I would knock you on your ass pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, look, again, echoing the same thing that you said, didn't really seek therapy. I wish I did. But I want to close this episode off. Okay. And I want to quickly summarize a couple of things. So, in summary, we know this has been a very long episode for you, the audience, right? Longer than our other episodes. However, we genuinely felt that we needed to do this way because it's a very topic which is very close to our hearts, both for me and Joe. And it's a serious topic. It's a topic that needs to be discussed. Mental health, as we've seen through the facts episode and even through our own personal stories, affects millions of people around the world. And if you've, like, through this episode, you saw that we only touched on two things. We only touched on employment issues and genetics. If you go on the World Health Organization, there's a list of mental health causes or effects. So, again, and we've echoed this a lot throughout this episode, before closing off with my regular kind of salesy comments for the show, I want to genuinely remind everyone that is listening, if you are suffering from mental illness, there are numerous solutions to help you out. There is no shame in asking and seeking help. Furthermore, if you know someone who suffers from mental health, please reach out to them and offer support. It can go a very long way for that person. So, finally, as closing remarks, we would obviously like to hear your comments and experiences with mental health. We are more than happy to interact and discuss with you, and we want to have this open conversation with you, right? It's important that we have it. So please feel free to comment and share your experiences with us. If you enjoyed this podcast and feel that someone else will as well, or will gain something from hearing our stories about what we've gone through, do share it with them. And you can find us on many streaming platforms, such as Google Play and Apple Music. However, our main home is here on Spotify. And with that being said, as always, I'm Theo, and I want to thank my incredible co host Joe here for participating in this episode. And as always, we will see you on the next one. Thank you.
This has been Uncut, and thank you for listening.